who are participating via the Zoom platform to register in the link provided in the chat box. And of course, you may also share the links for the FB and YouTube Live to your colleagues and friends so we can have more partners and stakeholders who can join us today. So we can now settle down, and in a bit we shall start. All right. So a pleasant moment to all of us who are participating in this virtual or online platform via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube Live. I am Lolito Tacardon, the Deputy Executive Director of the Commission on Population in the Philippines, and I'm glad to guide you through this discussion as your main moderator. I would like to welcome everyone to this side event of the 55th session of the United Nations Commission on Population and Development that will happen on April 25 to 29 in the United Nations headquarters, New York City. As we know, this year's CPD session will focus on the theme Population and Sustainable Development, in particular sustained and inclusive growth. So in line with such theme, this international webinar as a signed event will center on economic development amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on reaching the demographic dividend generally in the entire ASEAN, and specifically in Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. As we are all aware, the declining fertility in the ASEAN region is poised to reap significant economic benefits from their relatively young populations and rapidly decreasing dependency ratios. This demographic process reflects the potential to translate into significant gross domestic product growth if accompanied by effective government policies that effectively build the quality of the human resource, promote and produce employment, liberalize trade, attract foreign direct investment, mobilize capital and labor productively. However, this prospect has been critically disrupted by the global COVID-19 pandemic, which has been bothering us for more than 2 years now. This pandemic significantly affected the health, education, employment, social welfare systems, and other preconditions of demographic dividend in each country, and in particular in the ASEAN region. And so it is within this context that this side event was jointly organized by the National Population and Family Planning Board of Indonesia, or BKKBN, the Commission on Population and Development of the Philippines in collaboration with our Department of Foreign Affairs and the National Economic and Development Authority, and the United Nations Population Fund, both in Indonesia and in the Philippines. This international webinar aims to provide a platform for the sharing and strategic discussion of the current demographic and the economic status and good practices in harnessing the potential of ASEAN countries in attaining and optimizing demographic dividend. And this is being pursued as part of the South-South Cooperation Program of the Philippines and Indonesia. And for the information of everyone, this webinar is webcast here in Zoom, and in Facebook and YouTube Live of the Commission on Population and Development, BKKBN, UNFPA in the Philippines and Indonesia. So before we proceed any further, may I first acknowledge the personalities and institutions that are with us today in this virtual event. First and foremost, we have Mr. Bjorn Anderson of the APRO UNFPA, Professor Rizal Damanik, the Deputy Chair of BKKBN of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Ambassador Muhammad Puba from also Indonesia, Ms. Anjali Sen, the Country Representative of UNFPA Indonesia, and other high officials of BKKBN. From the Philippines, we have the Executive Director of the Commission on Population and Development Philippines, Dr. Juan Antonio Perez III. We also have Dr. Laila Judain, the representative of UNFPA Philippines, and representatives of the agency members of the Board of Commissioners of the Philippines, Commission on Population and Development, some more board members of the Partners in Population and Development, and other distinguished resource persons, peers, and representatives from our media partners. And to all our partners, institutions, and participants from Asia and all over the world who are tuned in via Zoom platform and in FB and YouTube Live. I will not be able to mention you individually, but we really appreciate your participation to this online side event. All right, so to make our discussion more engaging and organized, may I just mention the following information and arrangement. May I request the Secretariat for some rules that we need to follow for this event. All right, so the Zoom chat will be disabled, so you may send your question and for clarifications and the link that will be provided in the Slido that will be provided in the chat box. And please don't forget to register for this side event. All right, so all presentations will be done first before the question and answer part of this webinar. Okay, thank you, Secretariat. Okay, so we're done with our preliminaries, and I think we're ready to go with our forum. We really have loaded but exciting and insightful discussion side of us. So without further ado, we better get going. So for some inspiration and context of this event, may I first invite the Regional Director of UNFPA Asia and the Pacific Regional Office, Mr. Bjorn Andersson, for his opening message. Sir Bjorn, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Mr. Carl Kendrick Chua, Chair of the Board of Commissioners of POPCOM and Socioeconomic Planning Secretary, Dr. Juan Antonio Perez, the third Executive Director of POPCOM, Dr. Hasto Vardoyo, Chairperson of BKKBN, dear colleagues and guests, a very good evening from Bangkok. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to our valued and trusted partners, the Philippines and Indonesia, for organizing this important event. It truly reflects the fruitfulness of the valuable South-South partnership between the two countries. It also showcases the continued solidarity of countries within the broader Asia-Pacific, which is essential as we strive to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and ICPD Program of Action in the region. It will also support achieving the theme of this side event, which is economic development and demographic dividend among ASEAN countries. Although countries in the Asia-Pacific region are in different stages of the demographic transition, increasingly more countries have started to experience declining fertility rates, and have an aging population. At the same time, we still have to study how the COVID-19 pandemic will affect the long-term population trajectories of countries in the region. Considering this great variety, today's side event aims to provide a platform for countries within the ASEAN to share the experience and journey towards the goal of maximizing the demographic dividend, which is an effort that UNFPA is wholeheartedly keen to support. We hope the session will be insightful for countries within and beyond the ASEAN, and that this year's CPD continues to open and introduce opportunities for collaboration and partnership across borders. Colleagues and friends, I really do look forward to an engaging meeting, and I thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bjorn, for your message and of course for joining us in this event. As our partner in this endeavor, I'm also honored to invite the Deputy for Training, Research and Development of the National Population and Family Planning Board of Indonesia, or BKKBN, Professor Rizal Damanik, to deliver his message. Professor Rizal, please.
Okay, thank you. This is this moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night from Jakarta, Indonesia. So, Honorable Mr. Bjorn Anderson, UNFPA Asia Pacific Regional Director, Honorable Ambassador Enrique Manalo, Permanent Mission of the Republic of the Philippines to the United States, New York, Honorable Ambassador Muhammad Koba, Deputy Permanent Resident of the Republic of Indonesia to United Nations in New York, Dr. Juan Antonio Perez III, Executive Director of the PopCon, Honorable Mr. Carl Henry Q. Chua, Chair of the Board of the Commissioners of the Philippine Commission on Population and Development and Socio-Economic Planning Secretary of the Philippines, Honorable Mrs. Anjali Sen, Country Representative UNFPA Indonesia, Dr. Leila Saiji Joden, Country Representative UNFPA Philippines, distinguished partners in population and development, board members, distinguished speakers, distinguished guests from ministries and boards, participants of CPD 55th side event, press and media. Praise our gratitude for the presence of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Almighty God, for His blessings. We are in good health to have the opportunity to come together in today's webinar. On this occasion, I'd like to give the highest appreciation to all attendees who joined the webinar on sharing best practices, lesson learned of the issue of economic development and demographic dividend among Asian countries. Excellencies, economic development is both a right and a necessity to developing countries, including Asian countries. Social protections, health, education, employment, and infrastructure has to be put in place. Education and investment in human capital are also critical in order to reap the benefits of demographic dividend. The decrease in birth and death rates, as well as an increase in the minimum wage, has caused changes in the age structure of the population in Indonesia, which have an effect on economic growth, known as the demographic bonus. The bonus or economic benefit in question is obtained through an increase in per capita income as a result of the reduced population born by the working age population. The demographic bonus potential is generally measured by the dependency ratio. A country will benefit economically when the dependency ratio declines. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia will experience demographic dividend in 2030-2040. It is predicted that Indonesia will experience a period of demographic bonus in which population of age which age is 15 to 64 years, is greater than the population of unproductive age under 15 years and above 64 years. In the demographic bonus, the productive age population is predicted to reach 64% of the total projected population of 297 million people. But unfortunately, at the end of the 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world. The COVID-19 pandemic affected household, governments, and businesses. It has increased public healthcare expenditures and resulted to changes in labor supply due to mortality and morbidity. COVID-19 pandemic also played a central role in its impact on productivity in almost every Asian countries. both Indonesia and Philippines labor force had either lost their jobs, either temporarily or permanently, or experienced workload cut. Lockdowns and income declines in half of the countries, include Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, play a major factor in the income decline. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the percentage of people aged 15 years and over, especially millennial and Gen X, working during the COVID-19 pandemic saw a decline. In February 2020, National Labor Force Survey stated the millennial workforce reached 51 million people. At that time, the government had not announced a pandemic and an emergency response situation in Indonesia. The Gen X workforce is also still reaching a high figure of 45 million people. But unfortunately, in August 2020, National Labor Force Survey, both age groups of the workforce experienced a decline. However, in August 2021, National Labor Force Survey, an increase occurred again, especially in the two age groups, namely to 48 million people in the millennial group and 45 million people in the Gen X group. This means that COVID-19 still has an effect. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic can either delay or cancel the benefits of the demographic bonus. Concerning the matters mentioned above, BKKBN feels the urge to learn from best practices from countries. Therefore, I give my greatest appreciation for the cooperation between Indonesia and the Philippines to share information. I'd like to express my gratitude to the permanent mission of the Republic of Indonesia, to the United Nations, New York, and UNFPA, who have supported this webinar event in celebrating CPD 55th. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow His mercy on all of us. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Rizal, for your message, which provided an insightful context for the rest of our discussion today. So from the part of the Philippines, may we also listen to the message of the Socio-Economic Planning Secretary of the Republic of the Philippines and also the Chairperson of the Commission on Population and Development of the Philippines. A message from the Honorable Secretary Karen Chua.
Ambassador Enrique Manalo of the Permanent Mission of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations, New York, UNFPA Executive Director Dr. Natalia Canem, UNFPA Regional Director, Asia and the Pacific Region, Mr. Bjorn Andersson, Chairperson of the BKKBN, Dr. Hastro Wardoyo, Country Representative of the UNFPA Indonesia, Ms. Anjali Sen, Country Representative of the UNFPA Philippines, Dr. Leila Saiji Jodain, guest organizers, staff, and participants. Good evening. I am pleased to welcome you to this joint side event, Economic Development and Demographic Dividend among ASEAN countries. This joint side event serves as a prelude to the 55th session of the Commission on Population and Development, and provides an opportunity for Southeast Asian countries to exchange knowledge on population and sustainable development. After a temporary decline in 2020, the Philippine economy took a positive turn in 2021 and grew by 5.7%, exceeding market expectations. As we crafted our economic recovery program, we looked to the experiences of our neighbors for new ideas and best practices in responding to the crisis. This is why I look forward to today's session to learn more about your experiences in managing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also eager to share with you the Philippines' recovery strategies and our efforts to reach the country's demographic dividend. Our collaboration today and in the coming events will help us move forward from this crisis and realize the goals of the International Conference on Population and Development Program of Action. Thank you.
Okay. So now, may we also listen from our ever supportive partner, particularly from the long-running South-South cooperation scheme between the Indonesia and the Philippines. At this point, may I invite the country representative of the UNFPA Indonesia, Ms. Anjali Sen. Ms. Anjali, the virtual floor is yours.
Distinguished colleagues, Ms. Diane Katie, Deputy Executive Director, UNFPA, Mr. Bjorn Anderson, UNFPA Regional Director, Asia and the Pacific, Dr. Hasto Wardayo, Chairperson of the National Population and Family Planning Board, BKKBN, Dr. Carl Kendruk Chua, Chair of the Board of Commissioners of the Philippine Commission on Population and Development, POPCOM, and Socio-Economic Planning Secretary, Dr. Leila Jordan, UNFPA Philippines Country Representative, Professor Rizal Damanik, BKKBN Deputy for Training, Research and Development, Dr. Juan Antonio Perez III, POPCOM Undersecretary and Executive Director, experts, academics, and practitioners of population and development. Esteemed guests, I'm pleased to be here with you today to discuss economic development and demographic dividend among ASEAN countries. I would like to begin by thanking the government of the Republic of Indonesia, Philippines, and the Commission on Population and Development for organizing this 55th CPD side event in collaboration with UNFPA. As the academics say, age structure and distribution across different age groups determines what a country's dependency ratio will be. While both young and old groups of a population require investments in healthcare, education, and retirement income, productive age populations assist the society with the labor and savings needed to support dependent groups while driving overall economic growth. Asian countries contribute a significant amount of output to economic development worldwide. The emerging age structure has a lower dependency ratio, that is fewer young and older people per working age adult, which creates a window of opportunity for economic development. These characteristics, alongside rapidly growing populations of working age adults, will provide several countries in the region with the opportunity for significant GDP growth in the next 20 to 30 years. The Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development, or ICPD, underlines and guides the work of the Commission. Soon after the ICPD held in Cairo in 1994, the landmark ICPD of Cairo, the Population Commission was renamed the Commission on Population and Development, emphasizing the important linkages between population trends and development processes. Ever since, the Commission's primary mandate has been to monitor, review, and assess the implementation of the Program of Action of the ICPD. Today, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous nation, which will soon reap a demographic dividend. Indonesia also assumed the G20 presidency this year, encouraging all countries to work together to achieve a stronger and more sustainable recovery from the pandemic's impact. It is critical for us to work together towards universal health coverage and to promote sustainable financing strategies, including strengthening the commitment for sexual and reproductive health and rights to address some of these issues. Esteemed guests, UNFPA is fully committed to partnership with countries to help them on their path to sustainable family planning programs. Programs that will be the cornerstone of sustainable development and pave the way to realize the benefits of the demographic dividend. Investments in reproductive health are linked to lower fertility and reduce maternal and child morbidity and mortality, thereby improving overall health and quality of life. Women who have better reproductive health status and better access to quality reproductive health and family planning information and services tend to invest more resources in their own and their children's health, education, and future productivity, improve their and their families' overall health, and also contribute to longer life expectancy. Ensuring universal access to sexual and reproductive health information and services, especially for women and girls, is the focus of the 2021 to 25 Country Program Action Plan for the Program of Cooperation between the Government of Indonesia and UNFPA. We are also striving to achieve the 3 transformative results agreed collectively by countries at the ICPD 25 in Nairobi, which is also known as the 3 zeros, namely 0 preventable maternal death, 0 unmet need for family planning, and 0 gender-based violence and harmful practices against women and girls by 2030. I thank my colleagues, UNFPA Philippines and UNFPA, the Asia Pacific Regional Office, and I acknowledge with gratitude the contribution of BKKBN colleagues and POPCOM for this year's CPD side event. It is my sincere hope that through our discussion today, which will consider the theme of economic development and demographic dividend among ASEAN countries, we will be able to learn from each other and agree on the steps forward we need to take to not just boost economic development and demographic dividend in ASEAN, but also to achieve the 3 zeros and the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. If we work together more collaboratively and with strengthened resolve, and we make all the vital investments needed in people, we can certainly achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and ensure sustainable development for all, for everyone, everywhere. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Ms. Anjali Sen. And the last but not the least to convey her opening message to us is the country representative of UNFPA Philippines, Dr. Laila Judan. Dr. Laila, please.
Thank you. Mr. Carl Shua, Chair of the Board of Commissioners of POPCOM and Socioeconomic Planning Secretary. Dr. Juan Antonio Perez III, Executive Director of POPCOM. Honorable Ambassador Mohammed Kuba, Professor Rizal, Deputy for Training, Research and Development of BKKBN, colleagues and friends in UNFPA, esteemed guests and participants. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm pleased to see all of you online from around the world as we hold the CPD 55 side event organized by the Philippines and Indonesia. With its theme, Economic Development and Demographic Dividend among Asian countries, our side event not only exemplifies the excellent collaboration between the 2 countries, Philippines and Indonesia, but also furthers our commitment in harmonizing and strengthening our efforts toward accelerating the pace in achieving the ICPD Plan of Action through the South-South cooperation. The CPD 55 is centered this year on the population and sustainable development, particularly on sustained and inclusive economic growth. The theme is very appropriate in time and context, especially in the Philippines. The Philippines has started to undergo its demographic transition and is expected to benefit from the demographic dividend between the years 2025 and 2017. It is therefore a crucial moment to prepare and not miss this window of opportunity by putting in place the policies and programs necessary to reap the demographic dividend. This is why it is of critical value to learn about the experience of other countries in the Asian region. I hope that through this fruitful exchange of experience and knowledge, we bring to the fore effective and sustainable solutions, both at country and regional levels, and strengthen our commitments toward our vision of leaving no one behind. I look forward to having a meaningful and productive discussion. Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Dr. Leila. Of course, we thank all our partners for the inspiring messages. They have indeed provided a good context and insight to what we are about to discuss in this forum. And now for the main agenda of this webinar, let us all now intently listen to various presentations and discussions to be given to us by our distinguished experts and speakers. So for your inputs and clarifications, may I again request you to write them in the Slido, the link of which is provided in our chat box. Then we'll ask the concerned speakers later on to respond to these questions after all the presentations have been delivered. So first, to discuss to us the strategic efforts of the government of Indonesia in maximizing and harnessing the demographic dividend toward economic development in the said country. May I introduce to you once more Professor Rizal Damanik, the Deputy for Training, Research and Development of the National Population and Family Planning Board of the Republic of Indonesia, or BKKBN, and the Partner Country Coordinator representing Indonesia at the Intergovernmental Organization of Partners in Population and Development. He is also a professor in Human Nutrition at IPB University, Bogor, Indonesia. His domain of research is in the area of traditional foods, beliefs, and practices, the benefits of wild plants in relation to the health and community nutrition. And he has received various awards and published his researches in various international scientific journals. Prior to his current position, he served as a research fellow and assistant at the Asia Pacific Health and Nutrition Center at Monash Asia Institute of Australia, and the assistant professor of Department of Nutrition Science, Faculty of Allied Health Sciences, International Islamic University in Malaysia. So my friend and colleagues, let us all welcome Professor Rizal Damanik. Professor Rizal, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a nice introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to appreciate the POPCOM, the Philippines, BKKBN Indonesia, and UNFPA for holding this webinar for the 55 CPD side event. So the topic of my presentation today is government effort in maximizing and harnessing demographic dividend towards inclusive development in Indonesia. Slide, please. So in his inauguration in front of the Indonesian Parliament on the 20 October 2019, the President of Indonesia, His Excellency Joko Widodo, set his vision until year 2045, among others. First is breaking out of the middle class trap. Second, income per capita 27 million per month, or about 320 million per year. And the third, Indonesia's gross domestic products, about 7 trillion United States dollar. And Indonesia is in the top 5 of the world economy. He also highlighted the importance to optimize the demographic bonus through building superior human resources supported by a conducive political and economic ecosystem. Next slide, please. Moreover, Mr. President also expresses how family have a central role on the development of a country. Family development is the main foundation for achieving national progress, and the years 2025 to 2035 are the peak phase of the demographic bonus period that must continue to be capitalized. Healthy, productive, and quality families are the goals of the Bangga Kencana program towards Golden Indonesia 2045 or 100 years of independence of the Republic of Indonesia. And also, millennial and post-millennial are the main target of the Bangga Kencana program. Communication patterns must change, and the Bangga Kencana program is not just family planning, but builds a whole family in its various dimensions. Stunting is still a problem for Indonesian families, and the BKKBN is responsible for solving it. Next slide, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, from this figure, I'd like to explain a bit about the trend of the Indonesian populations. So, in figure 1, based on population survey 2020, the population of Indonesia on September 2020 is 270.20 million, and about the area, the Indonesia's land area is 1.9 million kilometer per square, with the population density about 141 people per kilometer square. And on 2010 to 2020, the average population growth rate of Indonesia is 1.25%. As we can see in figure 2, the proportion of the population aged from 0 to 14 years decreased from 44.12% in 1971 to 23.33% in 2020. And in the same period, the working age population, which is around 15 to 64 years old, increased from 53.39% to 70.72%, which is a demographic bonus. And meanwhile, the population aged 65 years and over rose from 2.49% to 5.95%, is towards an aging populations. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'd like to explain how Indonesia prepared the demographic dividends. So the decrease in birth and death rates, as well as an increase in the minimum wage, has caused changes in the age structure of the population in Indonesia, which have an effect on the economic growth known as the demographic bonus. So the bonus, or the economic benefit in question, is obtained through an increase in per capita income as a result of the reduced population born by the working age population. The demographic bonus potential is generally measured by the dependency ratio. And a country will benefit economically when the dependency ratio declines, and the dependency ratio will continue to decline and reach its lowest point between 2020 to 2035. Next slide, please. So, His Excellencies, from the figure, we can see that of the total workforce in Indonesia from 2017 to 2021, only half of them can participate in the workforce. There are several factors why this happens, including low quality of education. Majority is still dominated by the junior high school graduates and below. Is also caused by the low competitiveness in the national and global job market and low skill. So those three aspects refer to low productivity, low income, low savings, and not investing high risk of old age. These are being burdened. Next slide, please. There are platforms in harnessing a demographic dividend in Indonesia. Changes in the dependency ratio reflect at least two demographic bonus opportunities that are open to Indonesia. First, demographic bonus is achieved when there is an increase in per capita income as a result of an increase in the productive age population relative to the non-productive age. And second, demographic bonus is predicted to be achieved when there is an increase in assets by the working age populations and to finance their consumption in the future. The two bonuses can only be realized when they meet the prerequisites for quality and productive human resources so that their income is optimal and they accumulate wealth from an early age. Education and capacity building in accordance with the demands of the labor market as well as healthy human resources are part of optimizing human resources for the demographic dividend. And in addition, to produce healthy and productive populations, health investments need to be made from an early age until entering the old age. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, there are several risk factors actually for the life of the population, including first 1,000 days of life, such as neonatal mortality, birth rates, low immunization, stunting, and wasting. Early childhood development in this period also has a lot of factors such as unhealthy lifestyle, infectious diseases, vehicle accidents, and adolescents and adults in this period also has a lot of factors such as early marriage prevalence, low contraceptive users, maternal health, maternal death, obesity, and vehicle accidents. While on elderly, there are some factors such as Alzheimer's diseases, degenerative diseases, and disability. So where these four factors are also influenced by factors of urbanizations, environmentally conditions, and poverty. Next, in this slide, there are several effects if nutritional needs are not met in the first 1,000 days of life, such as the fail to grow because of the low birth weight, small, short, and thin. And it also affects the cognitive and motor development barriers, such as brain development and educational success. And the last, metabolic disorders in adulthood. It will lead into the risk of a non-communicable disease, such as diabetes, obesity, stroke, and heart disease. And next slide, please. Ladies, gentlemen, lastly, I'd like to share BKKBN operates a stunting reduction through family base. They are through sensitive and specific intervention. For the sensitive, the intervention is through the sanitation, clean water, poverty reductions, and education. As for specific issues, interventions can be carried out since the premarital, pregnancy, and postnatal. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Professor Rizal. And now the next speaker will talk about the ways forward on the population and sustainable development, also within the context of Indonesia. And our discussant is next discussant is faculty of the Economics and Business Universitas Indonesia, and he is a demographer who has conducted and published several studies and researches and papers related to population and development. And he also provides consultancy services to UNFPA and other relevant government agencies and development partners, particularly on demography and in its relation to development concerns. So colleagues, let us all welcome Dr. Omas Bulan Samusir for his presentation. Dr. Omas, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Cardon, the moderator. Allow me to share my screen. Good evening from Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to share with all of us about ways forward on population and sustainable development, in particular, sustained and inclusive economic growth. I am Omas Bulan Samosir from Lembaga Demografi, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. So the topics of discussion include introduction, population dynamics and its implications in Indonesia, population and sustainable development, in particular sustained and inclusive economic growth in Indonesia, and the last, ways forward. As the introduction, in the program of action of International Conference on Population Development 1994, in Chapter 3, it is emphasized about the interrelation between population, sustained economic growth, and sustainable development. It is written that the everyday activities of all human beings, communities, and countries are interrelated with population change, patterns and levels of use of natural resources, the state of environment, and the pace and quality of economic and social development. The population dynamics and its implication in Indonesia. In the last 5 decades, Indonesia experienced fertility decline, where the total fertility rate declined from 5.6 children per woman, according to the result of 1971 population census, to 2.4 in 2010. Meanwhile, mortality declined from 145 infant deaths per 1,000 live births in 1971 to 26 in 2010. And also we experience increasing both internal and international migration. As the result, Indonesia experienced changes in population structure, where we experience increase in the percentage of productive age population from 80, our age dependency ratio declined from 87 in 1971 to 44 in 2020, and the percentage of older people aged 65 years above increased from 2.5% to 6.2% in the same period. Indonesia also experienced changes in population distribution with increasing urbanization from 17.3% in 1971 to 53.1% in 2015. And also as the result, we experience continuing uneven population distribution. So next, about population and sustainable development, in particular sustained and inclusive economic growth in Indonesia. We focus on poverty and access to digital technology for sustainable development, and also for sustained economic growth, and on health, education, employment opportunity, and for inclusive economic growth, we focus on income. So in this graph, we can see that number of poor people in Indonesia actually declined during 2017 to 2019. But it increased during the first year of COVID-19 pandemic and declined later. And the poverty rate also declined in 2017 to 2019 and increased during the first year of COVID-19 pandemic and declined later. And the percentage of poor people by place of residence and island, we can see that poverty rate was higher in rural areas and much higher in the remote and hard to reach provinces of Maluku and Papua in the eastern part of Indonesia. So here is the graph of the population aged 15 to 59 years with information technology and computer skill by province. We can see that there is a considerable digital divide across provinces. Lowest in Papua province, only 3.6%, to 91.8% in the capital of Indonesia, Jakarta. Now about access to health development. In this graph, we can see about unmet need for health services by province in Indonesia in 2021. We can see that there is large variation in access to health services across provinces, which is lowest in meant the unmet need for health services, highest in Nusa Tenggara Barat and lowest in Kepulauan Riau. In terms of education development, we can see that there is significant inequity in education development achievement across provinces, where the mean years of schooling of population aged 15 years and above by province was lowest or shortest in Papua province, only 7.05 years, and longest in the capital, DKI Jakarta, 11.2 years. So in terms of access to and secure employment, we can see here that the percentage of informal workers by province in Indonesia, that there is meaningful differences in access to secure employment among provinces. It was lowest in Papua, where there was 80.5% informal sector workers, and it was lowest in Kepulauan Riau or Riau Island, only 35.2%. And secure employment opportunity also was lower among female and rural labor force. Here is our unemployment rate that increased significantly in the first year of COVID-19 pandemic, from 5.23% in August 2019 and jumped to 7.1% in August 2020 and then declined. And by age group, our labor force problem is characterized by low employment opportunity for among youth labor force. Now we come to the income, and here we have the average of net wage or salary per month in rupiahs of employee or laborer by province based on the result of our national labor force survey in August 2021. As we can see that our income varies greatly among provinces, which was lowest in the province of Central Java, only 2.1 million rupiah, to the highest in Riau Island and DKI Jakarta, the capital, which is more than 4 million rupiah. And by gender and place of residence, we can see that female and rural laborers receive less than their male and urban counterpart respectively. And in terms of by employment status, where it is grouped into employee, casual worker in agriculture, and casual workers in non-agriculture, you can see that casual laborers receive much less than their employee counterpart. And by main industry, we can see that there is also significant differences in income by main industry, which was lowest among those who work in agriculture, forestry and fishing sector, and highest among those who work in financial and insurance activities sector. And by educational attainment and gender, we can see that female laborers receive less, although they have the same education with male laborers. So based on the situation of sustainable development, in particular, sustained and inclusive economic growth in Indonesia, Here are some ways forward that our government is doing. The first one is to eliminate development achievement inequality in health, education, and economic opportunity, both by gender, by age group, urban and rural, and Java and outer Java differences. And also eradicate income gap by gender, urban and rural, and province. And also strengthening centers of economic excellence and special economic zones. And fourth, establish and develop creative economy as an economic growth source throughout Indonesia. And last, improve access to digital technology usage in Society 5.0. That's all from me. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Dr. Omas, for that insightful presentation. So there we have two presentations discussing the prospects and first challenges of attaining demographic dividend in Indonesia. Now let us see the prospect of this demographic window opportunity in the Philippines. So to discuss to us the results of his quantitative estimation of the demographic dividend in the Philippines, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Michael Dominic Del Mundo. He is currently an assistant professor at the Population Institute of the University of the Philippines, and he earned his doctoral degree from the European Doctoral School of Demography from the Max Planck Institute of Demographic Research, Germany, and Sapienza Università di Roma, Italy. He also renders consultancy services to various government agencies and international development partners on areas of population and development. Dr. Miko, may we hear from you, please?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Del Mundo from the Population Institute, University of the Philippines. I will present the study titled Development of the Demographic Dividend Estimates for the Philippines' 17 regions. Good evening from Manila. Next slide, please. So for this short 10-minute presentation, I will begin with a background and the framework that the Philippines is using to attain the demographic dividend. And then we will go to the results of the study, the estimated demographic dividend situation of the regions in the Philippines. And then we will close this presentation with some policy considerations that came about from the analysis of the demographic dividend situation of the regions. Next slide, please. In order for the Philippines to really benefit from the potential demographic dividend, the country needs to do two things. First, the demographic transition of the Philippines must be accelerated in order to create a large and long demographic window of opportunity. But that is not enough. The Philippines must also be able to capitalize on the potential economic gains brought by this demographic window of opportunity by ensuring economic opportunities for its population. Next slide, please. While we know that it is a necessary condition to lower fertility and child mortality in order to attain the demographic dividend, that alone is not sufficient because the demographic dividend is not limited to population dynamics. That is why the Philippines, the country, needs to ensure economic opportunities for its population, which begins with workers that are healthy, with quality education and skills that are matched with jobs, a better labor market condition and employment for our youth, creation of more jobs, and encouraging our young women to be part of the labor force. And lastly, to encourage financial inclusiveness and make sure financial literacy for the population. So here is the adaptive framework from the Philippine Development Plan to attain the demographic dividend in the country. It is clear that we need to do two things. First, accelerate the demographic transition by reducing fertility rate, lowering wanted and unwanted fertility, addressing unmet need for family planning, and addressing teenage childbearing, and at the same time reducing child mortality, infant and child mortality. But again, that's not enough. We need to maximize the gains from this demographic window of opportunity that is brought by this demographic transition. So we need to improve our human capital through better quality education and improved health outcomes. We need to reduce unemployment and underemployment. At the same time, we need to create more jobs and boost women's labor force participation and employment. And then last, we need to have savings buildup. We need to improve our savings buildup by ensuring financial literacy in the population, financial inclusiveness, institutions ready to help our population with that, and lastly, increased income opportunities. Next slide, please. So now we go to the results of this study, the estimated regional demographic dividend situation. And it must be noted that the results from this study are actually pre-pandemic. This is the baseline by 2020. These are baseline estimates for the demographic dividend situation. So COVID-19 is not yet really taken into account in these results. So for this study, we use the support ratio to estimate the demographic dividend situation of the country and its region. So this is in contrast to the use of the dependency ratio in other countries, because the dependency ratio only accounts for the population age distribution. If we recall, it does not take into consideration the fact that not all those in the 15 to 64 population age group are economically productive. For example, in the Philippines, there's also what we call lateral dependence in the 15 to 64 age group, but they are not economically productive, and therefore they are actually also considered economically dependent. So the support ratio addresses this gap in the dependency ratio, because the support ratio takes into account that people earn and consume at different levels over their lifetime. Particularly, working adults in the aggregate produce more than they consume, while young children and the older groups consume more than they produce. This is accounted for in the support ratio, and that is why in this study, it is used as a basis for the demographic dividend situation of the regions. Next slide, please. So a support ratio that is equal to 0.5 simply means that one effective worker will be supporting two effective consumers, that is himself and another effective consumer. The threshold of 0.5 is really the goal of the Philippines, for us to really say that we have reached and we are enjoying the demographic dividend. If the support ratio is less than 0.5, then that is an not ideal scenario. It indicates that each effective worker is supporting more than two effective consumers, meaning not enough to free resources away from consumption and into savings and investment. Wherein a higher scenario with a higher support ratio is ideal because it creates a relatively much wider demographic window of opportunity for the country and the regions. Next slide, please. So here are the results, the main results of the study. So for the Philippines, the support ratio is actually at 0.43, still below the threshold of 0.5, which indicates that one effective worker is supporting 2.33 effective consumers, or simply put, 100 effective workers in the country are supporting 233 effective consumers. So we also looked at the case of the regions, what is happening in the regions, because we believe that there is heterogeneity in the demographic dividend situation of the regions. And when we studied this, out of the 17 regions, only 3 out of the 17 regions in the Philippines, only 3 are already in the position to reap the benefits of the demographic dividend. And these leading regions are, of course, the National Capital Region, its adjacent region, Region 4A, and CAR. Their support ratios are already above 0.5. So meaning the effective workers in these regions are supporting less than 2 effective consumers, making more room out of consumption to savings and investments. However, on the other hand, we still see a lot of lagging regions in the Philippines. Most notable among the lagging regions are BARM, Region 9, Region 6, 4B, Region 5, and Region 8, wherein their support ratios are still not yet at the level of 0.4, still below 0.4. And when we look at these lagging regions, we can summarize their situation as having a relatively higher number of effective consumers compared to the number of effective workers. Next slide, please. So we saw that the challenges among the regions of the Philippines have strong similarities, but with varying magnitudes. It can be observed that these lagging regions that we've shown in the last slide have challenges with high fertility, whether it is wanted or unwanted. Most of the lagging regions also face low youth participation in the labor force and employment, and at the same time, significantly lower women labor force participation compared to men. There is also a lack of highly educated workforce in these lagging regions, in addition to below national average labor income. Next slide, please. So we conclude that low fertility is necessary, but for the Philippines, it is not sufficient. Reaping the demographic dividend requires not just interventions in fertility, but also in education, health, employment, and economic welfare, among others. And that is why it is imperative that government agencies actually work together, synergize, to realize this stream for the Philippines and make sure no region is left behind. There is no demographic dividend without economically productive workers. I think this is clear. In order to fully capitalize on the demographic window of opportunity in the country, the labor force participation rate and employment rate for both men and women in the Philippines, and especially also the youth, including the youth, must be kept high. Labor income should also be sufficient for workers, a living wage, to have savings and investments, which ultimately leads to upward economic mobility for the households. So at the end of this presentation, let me just show some policy considerations that came up after the analysis of the support ratios and the demographic dividend situation of the regions. So there are four main considerations that the Philippine government can support to make sure that no region will be left behind in its development and attainment of the demographic dividend. First, based on the situation of the regions in the country, first is we need to boost youth labor force participation and employment, improve financial literacy and regional labor income, reduce both wanted and unwanted fertility, especially on regions that still has relatively high total fertility rates, and last, encourage women labor force participation. At the core of these considerations is really better education for the population, because better education will affect all of these four considerations. Better education could lead to better employment, more income. Better education could affect financial literacy and their behavior, to fertility behavior, and better education can also encourage individuals to be part of the labor force. So moving forward, it is clear that the demographic dividend, while essential to the economic growth of the Philippines, it is not automatic. Key policy reforms and effective policy implementation must be done by all of government to take advantage of the benefits brought by our demographic transition. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much. And again, good evening from Manila.
Well, the attainment of demographic dividend in the Philippines is indeed challenging, as the country has yet to accelerate its demographic transition and strengthen its socioeconomic preconditions to increase its support ratio. So thank you, Dr. Del Mundo, for your insightful presentation. And to proceed to give us a perspective of the demographic dividend as an agenda of national development in Thailand, I'm glad to introduce Ms. Jinanggun Rojananan, the Deputy Secretary General of the National Economic and Social Development Council of Thailand, which is the central planning agency in charge of the formulation of the Population Development Plan of Thailand. So Ms. Jinanggun is involved in population development for more than 15 years now, and her job is to formulate a holistic development plan for human resource development, which involves capacity building, healthcare provision, and adequate social protection for sustained fiscal development. Ms. Jinanggun, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening from Bangkok. First of all, I would like to thank the Commission on Population and Development for inviting me to share Population Development Plan, a long-term foundation for Thailand development 2022 to 2037. Before I start my presentation, I would like to share with you the population policy concept of Thailand. When Thailand was considered as a poor country, there was a belief that large number of population in poor countries is a burden of development. Therefore, the main concept in population policy was to reduce population growth. As a consequence, this policy concept, Thailand's birth rate started to decrease. And in the meantime, people who were born during the high birth rate period were gradually becoming country's labor force and resulting in the continuous increase in the number of labor force and decreasing birth rate. Thailand relied on the labor force to mobilize the economic growth. Labor intensive became the fundamental factor in attracting foreign investment to Thailand. And this was the era where Thailand had an average growth rate of 7 to 8%, which is a very high rate because Thailand could attract foreign capital and technology and combine with Thai workers with low wages. This growth rate lasted around 1992. And at a certain point, we have found that Thailand's own labor force has already begun to be remitted and started to rely on foreign unskilled workers. Even at present, Thailand is still a country that relies on cheap laborers and still unable to properly expand the production structure to support higher wages. Then population development has resulted in a broader long-term development policy. Since the population, the development of growth, and poverty alleviation are taken into account. This is because if the country continues to develop, but the wages are lower or stable, it will not be beneficial to the overall economic goals. The concept of population development emphasizes on the restructuring of production that increase population in the middle class level in order to be capable of supporting themselves in the future. Thus, the following issues will be very crucial, namely technology transfer, research and development, innovation, private entrepreneurship, and etc. Because this will help building more middle-class people in order to work towards sustainability and stability in the country's development. Policy quality of population, such as quality of children, teenagers, workforces, is the biggest concern, and policies that will support this agenda involve the various dimensions, namely education, health, etc. From this concept, we use it to formulate plan by analyze population situation. Population of Thailand will be 66 million in 2023, with a proportion of a person 60 years and above, around 20%, workforce at around 63%, and childhood at 16%. And what I want to point to you is that our workforce reduction from 67% in 2010 to 63% in 2023. And when we look at the total fertility rate, it has increased from 2 persons in 1995 to 1.3 persons in 2018. This means we are unable to have benefit from population dividend in terms of quantity, but quality is also matter. The data related to human resources show that all age need to be developed. Female participation rates is lower than male, and 1/3 of elderly are poor. And also, although Thai people has higher average life expectancy, health-adjusted life expectancy has declined 4 years, and we face this with lots from NCDs about 320,000 persons per year. And about migration, internal migration mainly move within region, while international migration mainly involve unskilled workers. So we can conclude at this point that we also have challenges in developing quality of population. And at the same time, global changes has an impact to population development. Elderly population increase globally and also in Thailand, and this may lead to reverse migration and also the high competition for skilled labor. On the other hand, it creates opportunity to create care economy in service sector, which Thailand has a potential in this one. Technology advancement may support higher life expectancy, but high price of healthcare technology may increase the inequality to some group who are unable to afford it. And it also creates opportunity to access to new knowledge, but people need to equip with digital intelligence quotient to avoid the AI manipulation human behavior. Another concern is the composition of Thai population in the next 10 years. Majority of workforce will be Generation Y and followed by Generation Z. They grow up in digital era. Therefore, skill set is required to equip them in utilizing digital wisely and gaining beneficially. Mixed culture will also be the trend of working environment. And lifestyles of new generation. Generation Y need a marriage life with children under condition that they have security income, good career, good living environment, and work-life balance. And this cause a delay to increase the number of population. And lastly, regarding to COVID-19, it has reflected the weakness of Thai social welfare, in particular healthcare, education, and social protection. 1.1 million persons are at risk of being unemployment, and 3.6 million persons has uncertainty of maintaining the same level of income. For education, it presents that the learning loss in students and the estimation of student dropout is 65,000 for the year 2021. When situation change, paradigm has to shift too. And from the analysis shows that Thailand will get shortage of labor while we need income to take care of our age society. Then the country require new structure of production sector to produce high value economy, and we need new skill sets. We also need new management for foreign workers in order to attract them to work in our country and transfer technology to Thai workers. And lastly, country needs to equip people with digital intelligence quotient and has proper mechanism to provide cybersecurity to people. And from the analysis, it comes to concept of Thailand population development and plan. We set 4 objectives for the population development. The first one is Thai population will be developed with quantity and quality adequacy for each level of country development and proper population distribution. The second one is Thai population will be developed under quality environment and be equipped with 21st century skill. The third one is Thai population will have income security and be protected under social protection schemes. And lastly is country physical situation should be continues to be sustained too. And we set 5 strategy for population development, and that is relevant to SDGs. The first one is to promote quality families and creating a family-friendly ecosystem. The second one is to increase labor productivity. The third one is to enhancing financial security. The fourth one is promoting healthy living throughout the life course. And the last one is managing migration. And from this, we set prioritize for each policy to have more concrete of implementation. And we set prioritize as the first one is COVID-19 response policies to healing ones who has been affected by the COVID. Our concern is to provide devices and internet access to poor children so they can access to learning and assistance from government. Promote workers for skills upgrading in the form of paid training and matching jobs and skills effectively. Provide assistance to elderly under long-term care and relax debt burden for household. Another priority was put on big impact policies to make society more resilient. It's based on develop people to have competencies for 21st century, integrated resources from public and private stakeholders to develop lifelong learning system, and creating jobs for ones who are at risk of being replaced by automation, and finally promote compulsory saving. And structural reform is another priority. This one is to prepare society for new normal. It focuses on develop competency-based employment system, flexible working pattern to support new normal lifestyle, encourage private sectors to provide flexible working conditions for particular groups, such as vulnerable groups, persons not in education, employment, and training. This one should be contribute to our economy as well. Develop public-private civil society partnership mechanisms that is able to take certain action on behalf of the government. And lastly is to develop measures under comprehensive package framework so that the stakeholders can work on and meet the various needs of each group effectively. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jinango, for discussing some new and interesting dimensions of the challenges of attaining demographic dividend, particularly in the context of Thailand, such as the projected shortage of workers, which is something that is different from the situation of Indonesia and the Philippines. So next, to share to us a perspective of demographic dividend at a regional level, particularly among ASEAN countries as a whole, we are also privileged to have with us Dr. Sang-Yup Lee. And Dr. Sang-Yup Lee is a professor and chair of the Department of Economics at the University of Hawaii and senior fellow at the East-West Center. And he served as chair of the National Transfer Accounts Project, which includes research teams in more than 70 countries. And his studies have focused on issues related to population changes, labor markets, and social welfare, with emphasis on Asian economies. He has collaborated with a lot of international organizations as well as many governments around the world. Dr. Lee, may we now have your presentation, please?
Okay. Thank you for inviting me, and aloha from Hawaii, USA. Actually, it's 3:50 a.m. So let me actually start my presentation. So everyone knows what demographic dividend is, and then this graph shows the life per capita economic flows. So children and elderly consume more than they produce, but the working age group actually produce more than they consume through their labor. So during the demographic transition, there is a period that the production increases substantially as a nation as a whole, because the working age group actually increases, and also the fertility declines and the consumption declines. So the support ratio, as Dr. Mundo actually mentioned, is production divided by consumption. So if this support ratio increases, it creates demographic dividend, because demographic dividend is just a percentage change in support ratio. So as you can see, this demographic dividend, the size of the demographic dividend is influenced by three factors. One is the shape of individual productivity, production by age, and consumption profile, and the demographic transition. So I'm going to give you actually three messages today through the presentation. So this shows the economic life cycle, per capita life cycle of all Asian countries. So, for example, if you look at compare Japan, compare Japan with Korea. Japan has a very expensive healthcare system for the elderly, but Korea is not. And also, but similarities like Japan and Korea actually spend quite a bit on their education compared with the other countries. So this is actually very important because Korea is experiencing probably the most rapid actually population transition, aging, and their TFR is below 1. It's like 0.81 last year and 0.84 in 2020. But if this cost of healthcare is very high, probably the effect on economy, negative impact on economy might be much severe. And there is Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and you can also see Indonesia, Philippines, and other countries, Vietnam and Laos, and Cambodia in Asian countries. So one thing you can find is that all countries are different. So it's hard to actually compare all countries and also Asian with other countries. But you can see actually some countries spend more on their education, and most of the Asian countries actually have maintain low healthcare cost for the elderly. This is per capita. The message one is that, however, ASEAN as a whole has a very distinct demographic dividend compared with the other regions in Asia. So this shows 1970 to 2060. And this is a demographic dividend % per year. That means that this is a potential contribution to economic growth. So if you look at Southeast Asia and East Asia and South Asia, if you compare this, you can see actually very distinct feature of ASEAN. So in Southeast Asian countries, it started here. Of course, countries are all different, but this is like an average. Then it started here and lasts until mid-2030, so about 2033. And the effect is, the potential effect is about 1 percentage point to the growth. So if the average growth rate was like 6%, 5%, then the demographic transition, the demographic dividend has an impact on the growth rate by 1 percentage point. But if you compare ASEAN with East Asia, East Asian countries actually achieved much more, much higher demographic dividend during the transition. So it was much more rapid because their TFR actually declined much more rapidly. But it also ends very early. It already ended actually on average in most East Asian countries. And another problem of East Asian countries are, compared with the Southeast Asia, is that it's aging so rapidly. So the demographic onus, not the demographic dividend bonus, the demographic onus, it will be very high as well in the future. If you compare ASEAN countries with the South Asian countries, you can also see the differences. The differences, of course, on average, the South Asian countries' demographic dividend lasts longer, even until 2050. But they started demographic dividend quite late, and the effect of demographic dividend on economic growth will not be very high. It's not as high as East Asian countries. So demographic change can also lead to so-called second dividend. This is also very important through two mechanisms. One is human capital. As fertility declines, there is a trade-off between so-called quality and quantity. So the number of children in each household declines. So the household can spend more per child depending on health and education. And another one is through the asset-based reallocation. So it's called capital deepening. So to fund the old age consumption in excess of labor income, the individuals must accumulate life cycle wealth because they live longer. So there is some incentive to save more when they are young. So this saving actually can be invested for future growth, for productive way. So which leads to increasing capital per worker. So these mechanisms lead to so-called second demographic dividend. So some of the panel already mentioned these kind of two mechanisms. So this is Asian countries. So Andy Mason, myself, and then Ron Lee at UC Berkeley estimate the demographic dividend for Asian countries. And this olive line, this green line is the second demographic dividend. And this pink one is the first demographic dividend, what we are talking about. So we already have seen the demographic dividends will end around 2034. But the message is that with the investment in human capital and physical capital, the second demographic dividend can be even larger and last longer than the first demographic dividend for Asian countries. So this is a very important message. So even though the demographic dividend, due to the demographic transition, ends the second demographic dividend through the human capital and physical capital investment can be much larger and last longer. So the last message is that, of course, the public policy can influence dividends through these channels. I talked about the labor pattern channels, consumption patterns, and the population. Let me explain one by one. So actually already several speakers talked about this. Improving the school to work transition is very important because, and also improving the work to retirement transition and improving the gender inequality and increasing the women's labor force participation and productivity. But however, it should be effective. So even though some countries actually, increase the enrollment rate and spend more on education, in some countries there is no school to work transition. So some actually people in companies say that, these people are not very useful for our companies, something like that. So that's actually very important. And improving work to retirement transition is also important. So many countries actually has a mandatory retirement policies, and raising mandatory retirement age would be very important in the future. And also in many countries, people are actually getting less productive as they get older. So lifelong education is very, very important. So also the dividend can be boosted by through the consumption channel, and efficiency of spending on education, health, including long-term care, is very important, as I mentioned, because Korea and is one case. They experience very rapid population aging. However, they are still their per capita spending on healthcare for elderly is still very reasonable and very effective. And also health improves, as health improves, spending on young elderly for health and retirement could be reduced. So another mechanism is the public sector. So in some countries, efficient public spending on seniors will be necessary for fiscal sustainability. So this is actually for some countries, so like some more developed countries. But in other countries, the programs for seniors need to be strengthened, and old age support, continuing education training, and digital literacy actually requires a lot of funding and money. And also may need to think about some tax reform, because greater revenue will be needed in all cases. This is especially important after COVID-19, because what you have seen so far, like demographic dividend and the future projection, is based on the profiles and the demographic projections, population projections before the pandemic. So you can think of how this demographic dividend would be affected by COVID-19. So I actually want to see how these profiles change, how the demographic the transition changes for the future because of COVID-19. So probably it will take another couple of years to provide that kind of picture. And also need to develop effective responses to low fertility in some countries and address the scope for immigration policy, as many panel already mentioned. And the broad reform is very essential. So first one, of course, many people talk about this, rethink what it means to be old. So through the lifelong education, we don't have to get old in terms of health and in terms of productivity. And high productivity and good health must be maintained to a later in life. It has an implication on another dividend. It's I call as silver dividend. As health improves, actually older people can contribute to the society and to the demographic dividend much more substantially. Let me start my presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for your concise but insightful presentation, particularly on the various channels towards the demographic dividend and the role of public policy to influence them. All right, so that was the last presentation. So we can now open the floor for clarifications, inputs, and queries. So we again respectfully request our guests, speakers, and experts to stay for a while to respond to these questions. Let me see the questions gathered through the Slido. All right, so we have here a question for Ms. Omas Samusir. So the question is, how to improve access to digital technology and society 5.0, whereas many areas in Indonesia aren't getting the internet signals. I think this is also a problem in the Philippines. So Ms. Omas, can you have some insight on this, please?
Okay. Yes, thank you so much for the question. Yes, our government in our 2020-2024 National Midterm Development Plan allocated budget for what we call as infrastructure construction acceleration, including internet infrastructures and services construction in our 514 districts. So that it is undergoing in this current midterm development plan 2020-2024 with its measurable target every year from 2020 to 2024. Although the target in 2021 was not achieved due to COVID-19 pandemic. So the government target is in 2024, 82.3% Indonesian will have access to the internet. That's all my response. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Omas. Okay, so another question is intended for Dr. Del Mundo. We have here, I don't know if I understand the question right, but it says, would productive workers include those who have disease, elderly, and pensionary? I think it's clarifying about the non-productive workers. And thus pensions, I think considered as productive work. Dr. Biko?
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, as definition of the effective worker, for you to be considered an effective worker, you must be employed, part of the labor force, employed, and basically in the equation, we are using labor income. So the income on pensions and the other kinds of income, for example, in this formula is not yet incorporated.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Miko. We have some question here, but it's too loaded. I think we have 3 series of questions, but it pertains to, I think it's, I say, what does it mean to have children in ASEAN countries? So it's a value for children, no, in today's society. Is there a cultural perspective that becomes a reference for a family to have one more child or not? This relates to whether the culture of having children, number of children, is still one of the biggest influences or determination in policies to achieve the ideal TFR in current conditions. So I think it's all about the value for children, particularly in the fertility decisions. So can anyone of the speakers respond to this?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd like to respond.
Yes, Professor.
So what does it mean to have children in Asian countries in today's society in Indonesia? Thank you, Al, for questioning. So the family concept, the union between the couple to have their offspring, in some extent to continue their family line and to protect their family assets, and also to secure the parents' life when they are getting older. But also nowadays, couples having their children to create an atmosphere in their family life and to make their family life more prosperous and happily. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rizal. Dr. Omas, would you like to also articulate on the emerging value of children, particularly in the context of Thailand?
In the case of
Indonesia, sorry. Indonesia.
Sorry, like launching. Yes, we need children. Right now it's not launching anymore. Right. We need children for our future. You know that it is projected that our population will decline around the year 2069. Yeah, and our president already directed us not to reduce the decline in our fertility level. Yeah, so he asked us to keep it 2.1 children per woman. Yeah, he knew that we will decline during that time. So now the policy is to maintain that fertility level not below 2,000.1 children per woman. So we need our children to develop Indonesia in the future. Okay, I think that the importance of children for us in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romas. What about Ms. Jinanggun from Rojananan from Thailand? Would you like to articulate about the emerging value of children within your country, especially within the context of declining fertility in Thailand?
As I mentioned earlier, that to increase the number of population is very important, especially when we are not in the stage of using technology. This one is very important. But what we face or what we find in our country, as I mentioned again in my presentation, that for the Generation Y, their mindset is like they want to have children when they are complete in have secure in income, in career, and they have to assure that the environment is proper to raise up their children, something like that. So I think that Thai people is agree that they value the value of children, but because of the society, because of the high intention to raise up their children in a good condition, in a good environment, so they want to have the most preparation in order to raise up their children. This is my opinion.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we can still entertain one more question. Last question would be for all or for any of the resource person. Is there any empirical evidence to the discussion on the impact of population growth on economic development of a country? So I think it's more of asking some researches or evidences on the impact of population growth on the economic development, particularly the latest ones, I think. So can we start with Dr. Del Mundo? In the Philippine context, can you expound on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Population growth would mean if you have a large population, if they are economically productive, then that could be beneficial to the economy. If everyone is economically productive, but the problem is that if you have population growth, but at the same time the labor market is not ready, and then if you have high unemployment, and then you have a large population, and then a large portion of that is not in the labor force, then I think that could be detrimental to economic development. So I believe it's a case-to-case basis. Well, if we have workers and they're all economically productive, then they're sure they will be able to contribute to nation building and economic development.
Thank you, Dr. Miko. I think for this question, it would be also very interesting to hear from Dr. Lee, particularly within the ASEAN context, if there are new evidences on the interrelationship of population and economic growth, of course, within the context of demographic dividend. Dr. Lee, please.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the population transition affects the demographic dividend and economic development, and we all know that. But the economic development definitely affects the demographic transition because people view the future value of their children and adjust to their fertility and returns to schooling. So if the family actually decided to invest more on their children because the economy is good and they have a bright prospect, then actually they have probably less children and invest probably more on few children. So there are quite a bit of literature on this about the interaction. But we usually, because it's so complex, right? So when we actually build a model and estimate something, it's actually better to use like a conditional. So that means actually we use the demographic projection, the population projection as given. So it's actually much easier to understand how the population, the change affected the economic development instead of not the other way around. But the briefly speaking, yes, it's actually interact each other.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lee, for that response. Okay, I think we already have exhausted our.
May I share our experience?
Yes.
Okay, allow me to share one of these the empirical result for Indonesia, where we calculate the share of population to demographic dividend to economic growth. So we found that in Indonesia case that the demographic dividend for the whole population is 1.9%, and through the employment opportunity is 1.5%. So it is an empirical result of the contribution of population and of employment to the demographic dividend in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mas, for that additional information.
Yeah, can I have?
Yes, sir.
share my view?
Professor Rizal, please.
Yes, about the empirical evidence and the theory of Robert Malthus explains that more population will lesser economic development due to more competition to gain the welfare, while Esther Boskop from the UNDP has argued that the more people, meaning more potencies to boost economic development. So the relation shows the other ways around it. I would also like to respond to the previous question. Is it okay? About the cultural perspective that become references, right? So nowadays, life become more modernized and less families to have many children. And mostly due to more expensive about the living cost for raising children, and also more difficult to earn income, especially during hard times of the pandemic. Families having more children may also due to particular gender preferences. And this relates to whether the welfare of having children, number of children, is still of the biggest influence or determinant beyond the economic factor. Some of the society is also triggered by religious norms or values that the couples who getting married is also to have the outcome to have their offspring then. So this explains why couples having a certain number of children beside the economic the consideration.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Okay, so there you have it, and I think you already have exhausted some of the questions written in the slide. So we now wrap up our fruitful and engaging discussion with the closing remarks from the two collaborating and organizing countries. First is from our Executive Director of the Commission on Population and Development of the Philippines, Undersecretary Juan Antonio Perez III. Doc GP, please. Doc GP.
Greetings to everyone on this global side event for the 55th session of the Commission on Population and Development. At this juncture, we would like to thank our distinguished speakers, panelists, and attendees who took time to be part of this side event. We are privileged to have listened to and gotten inputs from our panelists, Professor Rizal Damanik, Dr. Michael Dominic Del Mundo, Dr. Sangyup Lee, Dr. Omas Bulan Samosir, and Deputy Secretary General Ginanggun Rojananan. Indeed, the conversations in this side event opened an opportunity for all of us to learn further about the trends and prospects for the ASEAN member countries in terms of inclusive economic growth and optimizing the demographic bonus. May this be the beginning of a potential South-to-South cooperation among more ASEAN countries to learn from each other, to support one another, and to advance to greater progress together. We concur with the claim that inclusive and sustained economic growth will not prosper without investing in our people in all life stages and advancing family development. All our economic efforts are in vain if we fail to realize the fundamental principle of the International Conference on Population and Development's program of action of putting people at the heart of every development effort. Despite our diversity, ASEAN countries find similar challenges to win the demographic dividend, starting with holistic family development programs to address unmet needs, labor market policies that will support families, and addressing the increasing number of senior citizens. As we conclude this side event, I wish everyone a promise of good health and peace and a better life ahead. Again, a pleasant day for all of us. Mabuhay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. GP, and best wishes on your participation in the 55th session of the CPD there in New York. All right, so next is Head of International Training and Collaboration on Population and Family Planning of the National Population and Family Planning Board, or BKKBN of Indonesia, Dr. Rokik Kusuma. Dr. Rokik, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. On behalf of the government of Indonesia, we would like to convey our gratitude for all panelists to participate in this event. It is indeed a very interesting discussion during the webinar, and we would like to congratulate to all participants to have this virtual program to be valuable and also fruitful. The event was held by Zoom and organized by the Population Commission of the Philippines, collaborated with the BKKBN and UNFPA of both countries. The discussion was veiled by many remarkable experts from various backgrounds related to demographic issues. There are Professor Rizal Damanik, Dr. Umas Bulan, Dr. Michael Dominic Del Mundo, Ms. Jinangwon, and Dr. San Hyop Lee. Also, remarkable inspirational message from the Ambassador Enrique Manalo. On behalf of the government of Indonesia, we would like to express our appreciation and gratitude to all those involved in making this event happen. To POPCOM, BKKBN, UNFPA Philippines, and UNFPA Indonesia. Hopefully, this event can be useful for all of us and keep the spirit of South-South and triangular cooperation alive. Lastly, stay safe and see you in the next event. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. So indeed, we're looking forward to side event where we can already see each other and conduct this activity face-to-face. Thank you. All right, so there we have it. We indeed have a very fruitful engagement today. And for the closing remarks, as advocates, champions, and workers on population and development, we are all aware that the potential of the changing demographic processes and outcomes at the global level as well as regional level, particularly in the ASEAN, and we have seen the disparity, however, of the levels of the prospect and actual benefit being seized by countries from this demographic window of opportunity. And our effort to seize and optimize this demographic bonus is critically challenged by this ongoing pandemic. But as difficult and challenging as it may seem, however, the spirit of collaboration and partnership among countries will for sure propel us together to advance economic development. So tonight, I think the greatest takeaway is that we are all interconnected, and any challenges can be worked out if we work together as one ASEAN region and the entire world. So once more, I am Lolito Tacardon. It was my pleasure guiding you through this activity as your moderator. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day. But before we go, the Secretariat is requesting that we open our cameras for the photo opportunity.
That's good.
Everyone, please. So, Secretariat, can you do the signaling?
Okay.
Next.
Please make a count. 1, 2, 3.
Secretariat is
Picture.
it's done or not?
Next frame. 1, 2, 3. 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 Next frame.
Okay.
And last frame. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you to all who have participated in this international webinar.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
now
thank
greet
you.
Chuan.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, thank you.